And we're back. Welcome to episode 67 of the Two Pad Stack podcast. Apologies right off the bat, guys. We've been a little MIA the last few weeks. It's been a hectic time of year. People are sick. People are busy with work. It just hasn't really quite worked out logistically for us here at the Two Pad Stack to get back behind the microphones. But hey, that has now been alleviated. And honestly, with the way that the Bruins are playing, we're not really missing out on much. So let's just take a nice little. Let's continue that Bruins hiatus. I think for this week. You know, if you're paying attention to the hockey world itself, you know that there are other things going on right now, and I don't know what better than some more best on best hockey, and it's been something that this overall hockey world that we all love and cherish has been woefully lacking in these last few years. So glad to have that back here. So that's going to be our focus for today's episode. We're going to be talking about the Four Nations face-off. So as usual, I'm your host, Ace. Alongside me, I have my good friend, Jake Reiser. Jake, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm feeling patriotic. I actually just got back from being north of the border. First off, my apologies in this hiatus too. Like Disturbed, I was down with the sickness. But I recovered enough. I was able to head up to Montreal and caught a little bit of this amazing action that we've had over the last week or so.
Did you get some poutine?
I did. It was literally the last thing we did. I had a friend of mine who writes about the Canadiens, said, go to Orange Julep. If it's the last thing you do, it's an institution. So legit, we hopped in the car, drove down to this literally a giant orange in the middle of nowhere. You pull up, you grab some poutine. It was delicious. And we hit the road and headed back. It was like 6.5 hours from Montreal today with the hour and a half of border crossing. But got some poutine, got some delicious food, got to enjoy some awesome stuff up there.
Hour and a half of border crossing, huh?
Oh, ridiculous. It was crazy.
Just a massive line?
Oh, like you're inching up like little by little. Granted, it's a holiday weekend, so I'm guessing a lot of people also went up, but
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went through like a really tiny border crossing near J Peak, and it was like a 5-minute process. There was nobody in front of me, so that was my only exposure. The only other times I've ever gone to Canada, it was a flight into Toronto. Which, if you're paying attention to the news today, you don't want to be flying into Toronto. Things have a tendency to go upside down, if you will. So luckily, no one got hurt in that plane crash today. That's why I'm able to make that joke. Everyone's okay, but yeah, not my favorite experiences going into Canada via Pearson Airport. But yeah, let's talk some international hockey. So Jake, like we had just said, Jake has already been up there. He was able to catch the Sweden versus Finland game. And I don't know, Jake, like going into the Four Nations face-off, I was kind of, I don't know, candidly, I was pretty apprehensive, right? You know, I said to myself, you know, if we're going to do best on best, why would you do a bastardization of it? And that's probably a little too blunt, but you know, when you have incredibly marketable players like Leon Draisaitl, like David Pastrnak, like these really top tier players that are just basically being left at the altar and not even invited to play in a tournament, like what's the point? Like it feels like it's half baked and just a lackadaisical effort to, you know, just print, you know, gate revenue. And I kind of was like, oh, it's also going to be like in the middle of the NHL season, so all these players are going to be more worried about their injuries and you know, it's going to be like a glorified exhibition. Nope. This has not been a glorified exhibition. This has been, you know, teams that really actually cherish the name on the front of their jersey and the privilege of playing for their country and going up against the other country's best. And it's just been fantastic hockey to watch.
See, I was excited going into it. I wasn't as apprehensive. Like, were there concerns on my end about like would they take it to the level that they needed to and not be worried about injury or, you know, playing their hardest because they've got club to play for? Yeah, a little bit. But, you know, one thing I know, especially about Europeans, I'm a big soccer guy. These guys love to play for country just as much, if not more so, than their club, representing the front of the jersey. Even the Americans and the Canadians that we've seen it, representing the United States, representing Canada, representing where you are from is so important to these guys. And I was expecting a good quality because, you know, at least it's the NHL. It's the best, it's best on best hockey again. I just was not expecting the amount of quality of these games, the fieriness, the passion, the intensity, the skill. it's been like watching Evel Knievel drive down the highway and fly through a flaming hoop. Like, it has been just electrifying amount of hockey, and it's been extremely fun to watch.
And it's just so great. I mean, and they were very quick. They're already advertising in all these broadcasts NHL players returning to the Olympics next year. And that's truly the epitome of what best on best is for me. I mean, granted, you have to deal with some of the silly IIHF rules, and you wouldn't have had a moment like what we just had at the beginning of that USA Canada game. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's just amazing, especially that USA Canada game. Like, that was like, hook that into an IV and just inject it directly into my veins, because that was so entertaining. I know that the NHL really is on to something here with this, because they had people that have never watched a game of hockey in their life on social media saying, "Oh my God, like, I don't know. Have you watched that hockey game?" Like, I'll tell you firsthand, like, I have a weekly meeting for the company I work for. We're a 100% remote company. And every Monday morning, they said, okay, let's talk about the football that we've got going on. And my football team, this, and my football team, that, football, football, football. First thing that this guy that is the CEO of the company I work for, based in Dallas, Texas, says, did you guys watch that hockey game last night? And I love that. I am like known as the hockey guy at the company. And like, they were all just ranting and raving. People that never watched hockey before. Is that what every hockey game's like? I was like, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. They're not all like that. But this is the kind of excitement that best on best hockey can bring. And kudos to the NHL for tapping into that market on ABC, which I think is a big one there too. You know, a really well televised channel. And let's just say that USA and Canada game really, they put the NHL on their back and they delivered. So, but we'll talk about that game in a little bit. We're going to kind of just go quickly game by game, provide a quick synopsis and our kind of initial thoughts and feedback. So we'll go ahead and get started there. The puck dropped in Montreal. The tournament began with a game between Canada and Sweden. What were your thoughts on that game, Jake?
Canada just likes to play with fire, don't they? You know, uh, Canada, not to say that Sweden isn't a good hockey team, they are, but Canada should be on another level. And the fact that they got taken to overtime by Sweden, they were up, Canada was up 3-1. Marchand had a goal that was cool for Bruins fans to see, maybe a little vomitrocious if you are a Canadiens fan having to root for Brad Marchand, but we love him. But get taken to overtime and be challenged in overtime by Team Sweden kind of set the tone really for the most of the tournament so far for Canada, and it hasn't been great for them. It hasn't been as easy as maybe people would have expected for them. So, kudos to Sweden, but Canada got it done in overtime. Mitch Marner, definitely, set the tone right for what fans maybe wanted to see: close, competitive, edgy. And the 10 minutes of 3-on-3 overtime, extremely fun. Something the NHL needs to do: bring 10 minutes of 3-on-3 overtime rather than
That.
Yeah, again, that's what people would love to see. Yeah, we'll talk about the Finland-Sweden game later on that I got to go see that also went to overtime. But 3-on-3 overtime is fantastic, regardless. So cool to see it happen. Canada won, but really tenuous for them, and maybe an auspicious start for them.
Yeah, and it was also interesting to note, what was going on with Cale Makar. Now, I didn't quite see what happened in the game, but he ended up going out, I believe, early, and then he was unable to go for the next game, but he did return to the ice today against the Finns when Canada punched their ticket into the final. So losing Cale Makar hurts. That is not a tremendously deep blue line as it is, as far as I'm concerned, for best on best. And when you have, one of the top 2, top 3, maybe the top defenseman in the entire tournament go down on a, arguably shallow blue line for best on best, it's a big hole.
Oh, absolutely. They had to bring up Thomas Harley. It was such an interesting situation that, they had Thomas Harley, that teams have like a 7th defenseman and a 13th forward. And then it's all a compliance issue. Can you get the visa in time? Can you get the compliance done out of the way to make sure that they can play? It became a really interesting scenario to see, okay, are these guys going to be down a defenseman playing? But you're right. It's tough when you miss a guy of the caliber of Cale Makar, it certainly hurts your blue line when it's thin. Not to say it's thin. Thomas Harley's not too shabby of a player, but
Yeah,
Cale
exactly.
Makar is in a different stratosphere.
It's great to be playing best on best when your replacement level player is like a Thomas Harley because he's got some great underlying metrics and just a good player in general. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, you can't replace Kel McCarr. So, um, yeah. So, any closing thoughts on Canada, Sweden?
Yeah, no, just an auspicious start for Canada. Sidney Crosby, of course, doing Sidney Crosby things that he continued his streak at the time. What was that? The 26th time in best on best hockey that Crosby represented Canada and they had won. So Crosby doing
Yeah.
what Crosby does.
Yeah. And shout out to him. I mean, just staying really, really in good shape. Very, very competitive, high tier player. I mean, it had I thought this was crazy, but somebody said the numbers to me. It had been a decade since he played last for Team Canada in a best on best tournament. So still doing that. That pass across the crease to McKinnon, I believe, was just disgusting. Like,
Oh my
just
God, on
how do you stop
that
that?
power play goal to start the game. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Bang, bang, bang. How do you even stop that? You can't. So, other thought is for me in this game, Marner gets that overtime goal. Uh, the Boston Bruins need to just back up the Brinks truck for Mitch Marner or Mikko Rantanen in this offseason. We'll talk more about that later on. I mean, there was some clarity that came out regarding the salary cap for next year as well. So topics for next week, just to kind of plant that seed and get the gears turning for you listeners and kind of plan on that coming up. Next up, Team USA made their Four Nations debut. They played against Team Finland, and the USA got the win in that one by a score of 61. But it didn't look like it was going to be that convincing of a win to start that game, did it, Jake?
Yeah, the first 2 periods, just a slow start for Team USA. I don't know whether it's a chemistry thing, whether they were really just hammered in by Team Finland, who, by all intents and purposes, has felt like a little bit of a dark horse. I know they're not making the championship game. It's already been decided who's in it, but they always felt like they were the frustrating team to play against, despite their they probably have the thinnest roster, in my opinion, in general. But kudos to them. But then the US came and just knocked the crap out of them to start the third period. It was just bam, 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 3 goals to begin the third. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. That's it. Game over. It just wasn't a game at that point. Within 5 minutes of the third period starting, it was over.
Yeah, I definitely had that shred of doubt creep in, though, because, when Finland gets that first goal and it doesn't really look like USA is being tremendously competitive, I'm like, oh boy, like, USA seemed to prioritize, a gritty roster over just traditional skill. And I was like, oh, it reminds me of when they put that Olympic team together and David Backus was like the top line center for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they just got steamrolled by Canada because they tried to be Brian Burke's truculence team and it just didn't work out. So Finland goes up early in this game. I'm like, oh no, are we doing this again? Like, is this a thing that's happening from Team USA? But they seem to, get everything back headed in the right direction and had that good third period to, start off the tournament with a W, which is great for them. And because they were able to win in regulation, that gave them the early entrance into the top seed because they received 3 points for a regulation win as opposed to Canada's 2 points for an overtime win in game 1. So that's another thing that maybe I would like the NHL to look at implementing for the NHL across the board, incentivize teams for taking those risks to secure the win in regulation rather than rely upon an overtime or shootout goal. So that would be kind of intriguing to consider. Any
Absolutely.
closing thoughts regarding USA Finland?
Again, I think the openings of tournaments like this, no matter how short they are, they just set the tone for how things should be going forward. And so, was it weird seeing the US start really as slowly as they did, knowing the caliber of talent that they have? Yeah. But they picked it up when they needed to. And, it hopefully gave them that confidence boost. We'll tell you it did. It gave them that confidence boost they needed going forward. That's
Yeah.
the big thing, confidence.
Yep, I agree. Sweden, Finland, these two teams don't like each other. You were on hand for this one.
Yes, I
What
was.
were
I
you
was on hand at the Bell Center. It was
tell me about your thoughts?
loud.
Yeah.
Um, Listening to Suomi get chanted so much of the time. It was funny because as we were walking to the Bell Center, my girlfriend and I, who we went to the game together, we were like, "How many Finns and Swede fans are there actually going to be here? Are these just going to be a lot of people waiting for USA Canada in the evening?" It was raucous. There were people really there actively cheering on. There were swaths. We could see stretches of rows where people were just the white jerseys for Finland and just the yellow jerseys for Sweden. So there was a lot of great representation there at the Bell Center for those two countries. So kudos to them. And certainly a very even match, a really intriguing one. That Philip Gustafsson, the starter for Team Sweden of the Minnesota Wild, started the first period for Team Sweden, came out in the first intermission with illness. And so Linus Ullmark had to come in reserve to finish the rest of the game. Back and forth. It was a back and forth and back and forth and back and forth game. Apparently, I found this out from someone as I was walking out of the Bell Center too. The last time before the Four Nations that Sweden and Finland had played in best on best, Adrian Kempe had sent a shot through the crease that went just past the post, and then Finland had come back on the rush to win it in overtime. Guess what happened on Saturday afternoon? Adrian Kempe through the crease past oh my god, who is the Finnish goalie? Kevin Lankinen. Through Kevin Lankinen, past the post. 2-on-1 for Finland coming back up. Mikael Granlund scores in overtime. Finland wins 4-3. Just history repeating itself.
So I've talked about it on this podcast a while ago, but I participate in a very nerdy hobby called the Simulation Hockey League, and I'm a general manager in the Simulation Hockey League. I have some friends and teammates on my team that are Swedish, and I can tell you firsthand that they were very salty with the way that this game ended. They believed that, there should have been a penalty or something called in that overtime situation that ended up leading to that Granlund goal in overtime. So the Swedes are not happy with that result of the game that you were in the house for.
As they shouldn't be. I thought they had played a really strong game. I think they started out the game certainly better than Finland did. But the one thing, again, I said Finland has felt like a dark horse and a thorn in people's sides for this tournament for a reason, is that they were consistent. It didn't feel like there was an ebb and flow to their game like there was maybe or really for Sweden. Finland just played a consistent game. It stayed on a constant level for the 63 and a half minutes that they played. It was just on a consistent level, and that they bulldozed. It wasn't like they bulldozed their way through. It just worked. It just worked for them the whole way through. If they went down, they came back pretty quickly. They never felt like they were caught on their heels too badly. And I think that's what kind of pushed Finland a little bit like more forward in this one.
Yeah, I think, I'm moving off of this game itself. I'm just talking more holistically about the tournament. And I feel like it would have been better served. And I know it's difficult to do this in the middle of a season, but I mean, every game counts so much in this tournament because one regulation loss, you're basically out of the running already. Because if you're not able to keep up pace with the other teams, there's no wiggle room for recovery. Like you're done. Like Finland or Sweden loses 2 games and there's no way for them to claw back into contention. So I would like to see if they do something like this again, which I don't know if they will. I think Four Nations is just going to be a one and done thing.
Four Nations
But
is going to be a one and done thing. However, they did announce we are getting the World Cup of Hockey back in 2028 with at least 8 teams, and they are all going to be representing individual countries. That's the big thing compared to the last one. We're not going to have like a conglomerate team
no
North
Team
America
Europe.
or exactly. We are going to have individual countries represented, and that is it.
Although I will say that Team North America was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life with all those young kids. Like I think a young guns team would still be pretty fun to have.
And like an under 23s.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that was obviously a big thing. So like I said earlier, we have Olympics coming up next year, World Cup of Hockey coming in 2028. And it sounds like the NHL and the NHLPA are in alignment on trying to alternate every 2 years between the two. So every 2 years we will have true best on best hockey. And I'm here for that.
Thank
I am
God.
absolutely
I know you talked about it earlier, but like going from the Four Nations face off, watching the Super Bowl, the NBA All-Star game last night, it was like driving in a four-door sedan on, like, a country road at, like, 2 miles an hour compared to what Four Nations has been like. It's, like, just such a different quality, such a different speed, such a different energy, and, I'll say intrinsically people are patriotic and like to root for their countries, and so that has helped. You told your story about how your boss was like, "So how about that hockey game?" But I also think that when you're playing best on best, that is what's so attractive as well. Like that, I got into soccer because of the World Cup, because it's best on best. You are seeing the best players, regardless of whether it was country or some mishmash of teams, playing against each other, and it just ramps up the quality of the hockey a notch. So yes, it's really tough that if you lose one game in this tournament, you're kind of SOL for, making the championship game. It's still super entertaining to watch regardless. And I'm glad that the NHL and the PA are recognizing that we need more of this. And this is the next step of growing the game, that there has to be more best on best.
Yeah. All right. So now the fun one. Let's talk about Team USA versus Canada in Le Centre Bell Saturday night. It is just an electric environment. Some interesting things. I mean, pregame, the anthems are going on, and the Canadian crowd is just booing the ever loving shit out of the American anthem. And even with the PA announcer saying, "Remember to be professional and respectful of all national anthems," the fans didn't care. They just booed the hell out of it. And obviously, I think that there's two parts of this. One is going to be naturally that Team USA, Team Canada rivalry that just has always existed. Canadians love playing against Americans. Americans love playing against Canadians. But then that is going to be compounded by and amplified by the current political situation in the world with, and we're not going to become a political podcast here, guys, but it's no secret that the current administration has its issues with Canadian politics and have their comments about Canada and implementing financial policies that maybe aren't going to be so beneficial for either party. We'll say that. So like I said, I think it's two pronged. That and that, and it just was cinema the way that game started. Now, Jake, do you think with the explosives right off the opening face-off, which I'm sure everyone listening has already seen this, but you know the pugilistic activities that happened right at the beginning of that game. Do you think that was premeditated, or do you think a little bit of that was, organic in nature?
Well, you mean the WWE match that happened around a hockey game?
Exactly.
No, it clearly was premeditated. The Kachucks said after the game that they and JT Miller had a group chat saying, "Yeah, we want to get something started. We want to get it going at the beginning of the game." So the Donnybrooks clearly were premeditated. But I think that the booing took it up a notch. I think that it what if the booing didn't happen, it still would have been electric. Crazy start to the game regardless. But I think the fact that the crowd was already so supercharged because of the anthems, I think just made it even more of a spectacle. And you know what? Kudos to those guys for sticking to the plan. They could have said, "You know what? It's too much. Let's take it back. Well, let's do it later in the game." Nope. Stuck with it from the get-go. It clearly captured so many people's attention that it happened. Both the booing and the fights, and then just the tone of the game after that. How physical Charlie McAvoy
Mm.
bodying Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby. Just it again. I've talked about this a number of times for a number of teams already in the tournament about tone setting. They set the tone for the whole game that we do not take shit, and it showed. And you know what? The U.S. earned that win despite having to make Connor Hellebuck stand on his absolute head.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, you're going to give up shots when you're playing against Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby. They're going to face shots. But I thought Hellebuck and the defense in general, like I thought McAvoy was a stud. I thought Slavin was a stud. I thought Brock Faber was a very strong player in that game. So Team USA's blue line and goaltending which we talked about this going into the tournament, that was where their bread and butter was going to be. They absolutely just shined in this game. And you already shouted out Charlie McAvoy. He played the most, and I saw this from a bunch of people on X or Twitter. That was the most Bork-like game from Charlie McAvoy that I think I've seen in a long, long time. So, um, obviously, it cost a little bit because he's needing to have a night off here. Ty Anderson reported earlier today that he's dealing with an upper body injury, and they're not sure if he's going to be able to go in the championship game on Thursday, which would be truly unfortunate if that's the case, if he isn't able to go. Um, some speculation has it that he suffered that after being cross-checked into the post. But I mean, there's no way to definitively confirm that. But just a fantastic game. Um, Game gets underway with a quick goal. Bell Center erupts with a beautiful Connor McDavid rush up the middle. Beautiful breakout pass from um, Jesus, why isn't my brain working? LA Kings, Drew Doughty. There we go.
Yeah,
I got
Doughty.
there eventually. Drew Doughty, beautiful breakout pass, finds McDavid full stride. And unless you're like preemptively back there, you're not going to keep up with Connor McDavid at full pace. I mean, Werenski was way out of position. McAvoy thought he was in position, but he just gets danced around by McDavid. Big boop, backhand over the shoulder. It's 1-0 Canada. Oh boy, here we go. And it just seemed like that was going to be the opening of a just absolute onslaught there for Team Canada. But USA got back to what they did well, and they answered that with physicality. And I know, Jake, we talked about the McAvoy hit already. I honestly think that McAvoy hit was what kind of changed the tone of the game, because it was McDavid that he just absolutely destroyed on the boards. And I remember watching the broadcast. It even had a stat for Charlie McAvoy up on the score bug that said Charlie McAvoy 2 hits on Sidney Crosby, 2 hits on McDavid. And I mean, that's what you got to do. You gotta attack those players, those top tier players, with physicality if you want to try to bring them off their game.
Well, so McAvoy was the defenseman who McDavid blew by to get Canada's only goal. So I think that hit later on in the first period set the tone, not just for him, you're right, but for the rest of the team to say, okay, you want to blow by me once when I'm not sharp, when it's in the beginning of the game, fine. You're not going to do that again. I'm not going to let you do that again. And I think I don't know if it made Canada play scared, but again, the United States defense just stood tall in the face of pressure like that. So kudos to them for, again, it's really easy in supercharged moments like that to get really rattled. You just had the 3 fights, you give up a goal, so you're already down. It could have been a bloodbath, but to mentally reset the way that it did and just play USA hockey the way this roster is constructed, color me extremely impressed.
Yeah, it was a fantastic game top to bottom, and definitely well deserving of the hype that everywhere, even non-hockey outlets, were giving it. So we'll go ahead and put a bow on that one there. Any closing thoughts on USA Canada round one?
Yeah, we say round 1 because it wasn't necessarily definitive that there would have been round 2. And I think at the end of that, my thoughts were everybody's thoughts. Please, for the love of God, we need another USA Canada game. Please, we need another one.
Yeah, so that's going to be the last game that happened in Le Centre Bell, I believe. So that
Yes.
buttons up the portion of the Four Nations face-off over in Montreal. And by all accounts that I saw on social media, they did a great job, and the fans and the players and the teams involved all really, really enjoyed their time. And now it's up to us wonderful people of Boston to welcome in the Four Nations players and media and everything like that. And I can only hope that everyone that has the chance to go to the games, that you guys really do enjoy it and are loud and give a good experience there. But it all started today, Monday, as we're recording. They got underway with Canada, Finland. So this game wasn't meaningless. Like, I won't say that the USA Sweden game is meaningless necessarily, but there's no impact upon the seeding of the tournament. It was, Sweden's not going to make the final. USA already locked up their position in the final. The only game that really had ramifications was this Canada Finland game. And it seemed like it was just going to be a coast to the victory for Canada for a while there.
And then Canada did what they kind of did in the first game against Sweden, and they played with fire and they let Finland right back in it. It was 4-1. All of a sudden it's 4-3 and with a minute and a half to go, and you're like, oh God, is Finland about to tie this up and send this to overtime? The Canada did end up scoring an empty netter. What was that? Crosby scored the empty netter?
Controversial.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, but it was a controversial one because, I mean, all the Finns thought that it should have been called icing. I mean, Saros even had his hand up, and the puck, as far as I could tell, I thought it should have been called icing too, but obviously the linesman disagreed, and there wasn't a lot of conversation to be had after that. But yeah, the Finns had Canada on their heels, and had I mean, 2 goals with the goalie pulled. Like, if they pulled that off and tied it up, that would have been a collapse of epic proportions, and I am here for that for Team Canada. Just I want it.
Well, to me, it shows Canada's biggest flaw is their goaltending. You know, the fact that Jordan Binnington is their top goalie, and yeah, he only gave up 3 goals to the United States. They were goals that I would kind of want back. And the fact that he's given up some shaky goals, he's given up some fluky goals, it would worry the heck out of me as a Canadian fan to have Binnington as your number 1. And it's not like they've got much better behind him. What is it? Aiden Hill is the number 2. It's not the depth that the United States has at goaltending. And so it's an aspect that would worry me.
Yeah. So yeah, just a fire drill third period there. They were looking like the Boston Bruins with their ability to close it out, but they do end up getting it done. Canada punches their ticket formally to finalize that Team USA Canada finale. And I mean, everybody likes that. We're all pleased with that result. That's what we kind of wanted. But, like I said, the cynical person in me, I think it would have been also hilarious if Canada crapped that one away. But the final game that we are going to be talking about is going to be the Team USA Sweden game. Like we said, kind of, I don't want to call it meaningless, but it's also ongoing, so we don't have final scores to talk about right now. But early feedback, I mean, USA gets it started right off the bat. That's on the heels of a just electric anthem performance from Todd Angeli. Some rousing crowds of USA, USA, USA. And you can hear it any Bruins game, by the way. You don't need to even go to a Four Nations face-off to get your USA chants from some of these drunks in the 300 section. But starts off good for USA, and you kind of think, okay, cool, they're going to keep this momentum going. Well, Trey Kronor, 3 Crowns, Sweden, they're playing for pride now. They don't want to just get punched in the face after being eliminated. They have something to play for here. And these are all NHL players, guys. Like, these aren't like, Swedish Hockey League players that are just filling in. Like, these are all legitimate NHL players, and they're proud of what they're doing, and they're proud to represent their country. And Sweden punches back. Gus Nyquist and then Jesper Bratt, both good offensive players, end up putting Sweden up 2-1. I think that's the end of the first period.
Yes, it is. And the U.S. now also has more injury news of its own. That first off, Austin Matthews isn't playing the game today. Charlie McAvoy isn't playing the game today. In the middle of the game, Brady Tkachuk crashed into the post. He was driving the net and slipped on the ice and kind of went left arm into the post, went down the tunnel. He has played 3 shifts since then, but seems to be a little gimpy. And then Vinny Trocheck went down the tunnel before the end of the period. So the U.S. is now looking a little banged up and in weird shape. Yeah. So maybe we see Jeremy Swayman in for the next 2 periods to let everybody breathe a little bit.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, I think they should give Swayman some time, right? I mean, he's the starting goalie for the Boston Bruins. They're in Boston. It's a meaningless game. Like, at least let him get some minutes in the crease. I think that would be good. I mean, honestly, I haven't seen the shots. Have you seen the goals for Sweden yet?
I have, yeah. The first one for Gus Nyquist was kind of on the rush, a little fluky. Jesper Bratt's was actually pretty good. really crappy turnover by the U.S. in the neutral zone. Will Nylander with a beautiful feed. Jesper Bratt in the middle of the slot comes and just does like a little like quarter spin and kind of snipes it. So really nice goal for Sweden on the second one. So that one's a hard one to fault them on. So I don't know
It'd
whether
be
that's
one
a
thing if they were both soft. You'd be like, oh, just put Swayman in now because Ottinger's not playing fantastically. But I mean, hey, I will give Jake Ottinger credit. He's been the better goaltender than Jeremy Swayman this season in general during the regular season. Obviously, no one's been as good as Connor Hellebuck. He's been the best goalie on the planet, I think, for the last year and a half, 2 years. So, Swayman was never going to get the starter's crease. But yeah, so 2-1 Sweden at the end of the first.
Otter
But
does have
really,
Boston connections too. He is a Boston University former player, so not like he hasn't played at TD Garden once or twice in his time too.
Yeah, true. Well, I think everybody's just kind of already shifting their focus to Thursday night at 8 p.m. when you're going to see this finale here. I believe the NHL returns to action on Friday as well, which will be kind of interesting. I might be wrong on that. I think it's a pretty quick turnaround. It might be Friday or Saturday.
It's a Saturday. It's a Saturday turnaround. So Thursday, the 20th is the championship game, and then the 22nd, it's a ginormous slate. At the very least, the Bruins are home. They're at the Garden, so it's not like the Bees have to go anywhere. But it's a very fast turnaround.
Yeah, so everybody's eyes are on that game now, and for good reason. It's going to be electric. I wish I opened up a new mortgage to be able to afford it because I was looking at secondary market rates earlier today, and it was like for the cheapest seat, like upper 300s, $1,000, and then I just for shits and giggles, I looked and I was looking at the front row seats that were listed, and that's like $5,400, and just mind-boggling numbers. So, I mean, hey, good on the NHL for creating that demand. Like, I kind of wish I bought those tickets at the beginning and listed them on the marketplace because I could use a little payday right about now. But any thoughts on the championship preview, Jake?
USA, USA, USA. I'm sorry. I hope you guys are watching on YouTube because I'm wearing the USA Four Nations Face-Off jersey.
Yes.
For those of you who are just wondering, what the hell is he screaming? If you're listening wherever you listen to your podcasts, look, I think it's a humongous game for both sides. I think that the United States should feel really proud that they were able to beat the Canadians on Canadian soil. And now they have to defend their home turf. And so I'm sure Team Canada wants to serve up a little bit of their own justice and take down the US on their home turf. So, it's up to each team who's got the most pride, who's going to play in front of their home fans and do their country's justice. And it's the best game for it to happen with. It's the best to have US Canada as the final. I'm sure people were just like, oh, it's expected, based on the population of the NHL, it's majority USA and Canadians.
Script was always saying USA Canada. That's just what they wanted to have scripted.
But it felt earned. It feels earned for sure. Canada, I'm sure, wants to, not have the demons of we're a team that makes it easy for teams to play against us, that we give up goals in inopportune times, or we give up rallies when we don't need to and make things tough on ourselves. And so I'm sure they would not only like to beat the US, but do it handily. And I'm sure the US would like to handily beat the Canadians too. I'm sure they would just love a lot of facetious ole, ole, ole's coming out of the TD Garden crowd come the third period. So it is going to be extremely engaging. I would bet it's on ABC. I would hope it's on ABC or at the very least ESPN mainline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on ESPN on cable in and of itself. So there will be a lot of eyes on this, and I hope that it lives up to the hype that not only the first game has, but that a championship game of this caliber should have.
I just want it to be a good game. I don't really want it to be a blowout either way. I want a really tight fought electric game, and I think that that's what these two teams are going to give us.
I love an overtime. If you want my dream scenario here, goes to 10 minutes, overtime, USA gets a golden goal against Sidney Crosby just for the schadenfreude of the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. A little bit of retribution for some past grievances. You know, US and Canada has such a historic hockey rivalry.
Yeah, just don't let it be a Kachuk. I'm so tired of these two guys.
You know, I guess that can we get into studs and duds, because it makes me vomit to have to say it that the Kachucks are my studs.
Before we do that, let's go ahead and send it over to our sponsors, and then we'll jump into studs and duds.
Yeah.
This season, the Two Pad Stack podcast is proudly supported by two fantastic local businesses. First, we're going to give a shout out to Earth Eagle Brewings, where great beer meets great company. With locations in both Portsmouth and Somersworth, New Hampshire, Earth Eagle is something for everybody. Whether you're relaxing in their Portsmouth beer garden or enjoying live music and trivia at the Somersworth pub, you'll be in good hands with their craft beers, epic hot dogs, and much more. And don't forget, if you're into brewing your own beer, their homebrew shop has you covered in Somersworth. And when it comes to tattooing, there's no better place than Vital Ink Tattoo in Barrington, New Hampshire. The artists at Vital Ink are all about turning your ideas into tattoos you'll love forever. The team works hard to make sure every visit is comfortable, and their dedication to making your tattoo experience fun and relaxing is unmatched. Whether you're getting your first piece or adding to your collection, Vital Ink is the place to go. Special thanks to both of these sponsors for supporting the Two Pad Stack podcast this season. Be sure to check them out and show them some love.
All right, so we're here at Studs and Duds. Jake, you were already starting. Jump right in.
It makes me so sick that the Kachucks are my studs. But if you are picking anybody who, like, they epitomize what this USA hockey team is all about, the way that they play, the energy, the mentality, the scoring talent, it's both of the Kachucks. Are they shitheads? Absolutely. But it's like, to me, it's like how Canada must feel about Brad Marchand. Do you hate playing against him? Is it nauseating? Do you want him to just get like sucker punched if you're playing against him? Absolutely. But when he's on your team, if you are a fan of the team that he is a part of and you need to root for him, you love to root for him. Matt Kachuk, obviously incredibly skilled, incredibly talented, great at getting under people's skin. Brady, more of a big body, more of a traditional power forward, still a great scorer, and maybe not as prolific as Matt, but still a great scorer. The two of them clearly having fun on the ice together. They epitomize what it means to play USA hockey right now. So as much as it pains me to say it, because I hate them otherwise, as much as Brady is also a BU alum, I will very loath to give hate to BU alums. It is incredibly fun to actually root for them for once. So kudos to the two of them for bringing a lot of life and a lot of energy and a lot of fun to Team USA. And frankly, a tournament, there is one pitfall about a tournament like this, and that it feels stale in the sense that these guys get patriotic and that they play with enough of a respect where it's just like too respectful. These guys are like, okay, we're the US. We're going to come out and just play USA hockey and not give a shit what anybody else thinks. The fact that Freebird is the goal song, that they brought that from the World Juniors. I remember complimenting it at the time, saying it's so cocky and badass. I'm so glad they brought it back as the goal song for the Four Nations. So I'm sorry, but you know what? Good for the Kachucks that they're my studs for I'll call it the tournament so far. And then my duds, I'm going to say this with the caveat that I have already had it, but also I'll bring it back into Four Nations context, is the flu. The flu, everybody's getting sick. It's going around. I was on IR last week. It was completely miserable, but Team Sweden, the flu is apparently going around that room. I have a feeling that's why Philip Gustafsson was pulled in the game I went to against Finland. I know Mika Zibanejad and I know one other member of Team Sweden are currently not playing tonight as well because they have the flu. So clearly there's, pardon me, there's a bug going around. I'm hoping that it doesn't spread to the other teams. I'm hoping that it doesn't spread into these guys, insofar as Rickard Rakell, who's also out tonight for the Swedes. But I'm hoping it doesn't spread insofar as to make the championship game worse on Thursday, that it hampers NHL rooms, and that the NHL now going forward has a weird flu bug that goes around internationally.
Well, maybe it's just the Roberto Luongo shit situation. They just all can't stop shitting.
They got some bad putin up in Montreal.
Yeah, exactly.
So the flu is my stud, both personally I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's not fun, but also for the tournament in and of itself, and that I hope it doesn't affect anything going forward for, the rest of the competition and for the restart of the NHL at the end of the week.
Yeah, eventually the players are all going to have to submit mandatory flu testing, and if they test positive, they're going to have to go into. I'm just kidding. Let's move past that bubble time in our lives.
A little bit of trauma.
Oh yeah. All right. So my stud is going to be Connor Hellebuck. I already kind of alluded to it earlier. The guy's the best goalie on the planet right now, and for a long time, I was incredibly skeptical of him. He always kind of looked like he was a positional goalie and less of an athletic goalie. Kind of reminded me a little bit of like Ben Bishop, if you will. But my opinion has changed on that, and I think that he is well deserving of the starting role here in the Four Nations tournament for Team USA. And he is just lights out. He's just an incredibly good goaltender, very, very in control, rarely out of position. And he's a big guy in general. And if you can combine that, stellar positioning with, athleticism and size, like that's the template of a modern Vezina caliber goaltender. And it's no surprise that he's performing as well as what he is. And my biggest thing was, how is he going to look in a best on best situation when you have McKinnon, McDavid, these guys coming at you every shift instead of every 3 shifts? Like, it's going to be a different dynamic for a goaltender. And I think that he's, not just, done well under pressure. I think that he's thrived. So, Connor Hellebuck, heck of a job, my dude. You're my stud of the week. Any thoughts on Hellebuck, Jake?
So I saw Hellebuck as a young buck at UMass Lowell, and I knew he was really good back then. I don't necessarily agree with your assessment with him. Yes, he's a really good positional goaltender, but I think sometimes positional goaltenders are that good because their technique and their form is that good. Granted, he's also had very good defenses in front of him in Winnipeg, from Dustin Byfuglien to Josh Morrissey now. He's had good defenses, but I've known him to be positionally sound, to be very aware, and to just be a nightmare to play against because of how positionally sound he is. So kudos to him that it being positionally sound is one thing and it makes you a very good goalie. It takes another set of skills to make you an elite goalie. So credit to whatever he's learned to take it to the even higher level than I've known him at. But I've always viewed him as a really solid goalie otherwise. But I think it's a great pick for stud of the tournament so far.
Thank you. And my dud is going to be Team Sweden. I mean, it's a little disappointing for them. I mean, I do have Swedish heritage, so I do kind of have an affinity toward Team Sweden. Bruins have Elias Lindholm on the team. Former Bruin Linus Ullmark is there. So I did want to see them do better than what they have. And I'm not saying they necessarily did poorly, but it doesn't quite seem like they had as much juice as some of the other teams. Even Finland, they had 2 overtime losses, and Sweden just kind of seemed to be trailing behind all the other teams in this tournament. So, really hopeful that we can see more out of Team Sweden here in the Olympics next year, and hopefully in the World Cup of Hockey as well.
They have the best jerseys too. The Trey Crenor.
Oh my God,
even
they're
the way
so
they were
pretty.
done in the tournament, seeing them up close and seeing the beautiful detailing inside of the crowns, they are gorgeous jerseys. So it sucks that it's wasted this tournament and that they're not going to be in the finals and they haven't necessarily felt as competitive. I said it in the game against Finland that I went to. Their game very much ebbed and flowed. It wasn't as consistent and like steadfast as Team Finland's was. And maybe that was kind of a pitfall for them, as much as, the flu definitely hurts, but their style of game maybe didn't gel as well as they needed it to.
Yeah. That's actually going to do it for all the topics we had to talk about for Four Nations here. It's a little bit of a shorter episode, but that's fine. It's a good way for us to ease back into it. We are planning on being back and breaking down some Boston Bruins hockey, as well as the results from the gold medal game for next week's episode. As always, please make sure you're following us on our socials. We're available on TikTok, on Twitter, on YouTube, Instagram. And we do also have our wonderful merch store on our website. That's at www.twopadstackpod.com. So, any closing thoughts for this week, Jake?
I'm sorry that Bruins hockey has to come back because it's been so fun watching this tournament, and it's been great. I've actually been having fun watching hockey for the first time in
I
a
know.
while.
What a
So
delight.
I'm sorry I have to go away so soon, everybody.
Yeah, we're all going to be bitching and moaning soon enough about who the Bruins should sell at the deadline and not to add and all that stuff. But hey, that's a story for next week. So, on behalf of the, Burge who can't be here today, myself, Jake, thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you. We value you, and we hope to bring you some more fun hockey talk next week. So, until then, peace.